We were having another lockdown drill when I found out about Holly Hayes. I was in social studies, third period, when Principal Weston's muffled voice spat at us from the ceiling. We all sighed and ducked under our long tables, limbs shoving aside plastic chairs as we army crawled into tucked positions. Miss Lowe shut the door and sat back at her desk to grade papers. I remember being glad that the drill happened in third period because that's the class I shared with my best friend Dina. We lay our arms under the table, glancing at Miss Lowe, waiting for the unspoken amount of time to pass until we could whisper to each other without getting in trouble. When we heard a few boys at the table next to us snicker at each other without retribution, Dina glanced around and whispered, "Who do you like?" Her favorite game. "No one," I said. She rolled her eyes. "You have to like someone." I shrugged and dug my chin into the carpet. A grumpy blue color with red flecks. "I don't know. I don't. Who do you like?" "I'll tell you if you tell me." "But I know you like Tom." She held a finger to her lips and glared at me. "Not anymore." I looked around the room, trying to think of a reasonable victim for me to like so I could learn her secret. I suddenly remembered for a moment from the day before, a boy running out of the lunch line to chase a dime and a penny that were rolling away. Change I had dropped in an embarrassing effort to get money out of my new Pikachu wallet. He handed the coins to me. His smile was so bright and he had dimples. "The new kid," I said, "but I don't know his name." Dina raised her eyebrows. "Ricardo?" I shrugged. "Maybe. I don't know." Dina gasped so loudly that Miss Lowe shushed her. "Oh, no. But you heard what happened to his baby sister, right?" I barely knew what she was talking about. "No?" "Holly, a sixth grader," Dina said with a grin. "Her posters went up this morning. She's missing." I remember feeling the weight of those words like a foot stepping on my back. I remember thinking she was lying. Then thinking I was dumb for not knowing until 3 whole periods had passed. Then hearing Dina babble about her latest crush, whose name I forgot immediately because I just didn't care anymore. The missing posters went up on every telephone pole and bulletin board in Hochstadt, which turned out to be a lot for such a small town. A few made it onto trees, even though people mostly avoided the black maples that hovered above all of our buildings because the black maple sap in Hochstadt was notoriously gooey and hard to get out of your clothes. I felt a dramatic, overwhelming tug at my heartstrings every time I saw Ricardo in the halls. He had stopped trying to make friends. His eyes had bags under them that I'd never seen on any other 8th grader. All of his notebooks looked like they'd been yanked from a shredder, and he often trailed pencil stubs behind them. I wondered why his parents didn't just pull him out of school. But Dina pointed out that they were probably distraught at home, so maybe being at school gave him some peace. It didn't take long for the high schoolers before they started passing down rumors to their siblings in middle school, which then spread into our territory like wildfire. I heard the rumors from my science partner, Finn DeCorma, whose older brother said that this was exactly like the disappearance of Troy Evers and Mackenzie Kentworth, 2 9th graders who disappeared a few years back. I didn't remember much about Troy and Mackenzie, but thankfully, Finn was more than happy to tell the tales while I labeled the parts of a cell in colored pencil. Troy and Mackenzie didn't just disappear together like everyone thought. Mackenzie was first, sometime around 9 at night. Troy was last seen the next day around 3. The gossip mill suggested that they were in a secret relationship and ran off together, but neither seemed to be their type. Troy was quiet, shy, and small for his age. Mackenzie wore blue lipstick and was rumored to be a witch. Finn said that people were afraid of her because she cut words into her arms, and everyone knew Troy was in the closet. So no matter what the adults said, none of the kids believed that they left together, and no one really believed they left by choice. Because my brother saw the monster, Finn said, he was trying to convince Troy to play kickball with him, and then he looked at the woods, and the sap man was right there. I tried not to roll my eyes. It was so like a high schooler to make up something like that so he could be involved in a spooky story. But I also remembered rumors going around that someone's older sister had seen Mackenzie making dolls of the sap man out of the sticks behind the school. I felt that it just had to be a lie. Even though I didn't believe him, The Sapman of Hockstadt lore had a very distinct look. He had these long, squiggly arms that would be very hard to make out of sticks, and he had a pale, featureless head. It probably just seemed like a Mackenzie thing to do. So, people started saying it without thinking it through. Anyway, no one ever found Troy or Mackenzie. I think it was March when Holly went missing, because the whole Hockstadt PTO put on their puffy coats and brave faces for the Find Holly Ray's search party. Mr. and Mrs. Rays made several TV appearances, sobbing, recalling their daughter's last whereabouts, begging whoever had her to just return her, no questions asked. I noticed Ricardo was never on TV. Soon people started whispering that maybe, just maybe, Ricardo had killed his sister. Then the whispers turned to roars. Kids at school got mean. Well, some, not all. Dean and I just felt bad for him. About 4 or 5 days after Holly went missing, all my own thoughts and theories about the case went up in smoke. I'm not sure that really would have happened if Dina hadn't had an emergency school council meeting during lunch, but she said, and then, I don't know, things just started aligning. Dina and I usually sat with a few other friends, but those friends spent much of their lunch reading manga, and I knew I wouldn't be missed. I saw Ricardo sitting at the end of the table by himself, and I thought about the Sapman, and I felt angry. I felt like he had to know about the Sapman from a reliable source, me, before some bullies tried to use the Sapman to scare him to death. I'd already seen an etching of the Sapman onto his locker, but it was pretty poorly drawn, so I doubted it had really clued Ricardo into anything. Still, it was only a matter of time before the convoluted whispers of Ricardo the Sapman reached his ears. I plopped my lunchbox on the table across from him. He looked up from his carrot sticks that he was picking at, but didn't say anything. "Hi," I said. "I'm Rowan." Ricardo nodded. I knew I was about to lose my nerve, so I blurted out, "Have you heard of the Sapman?" Ricardo looked at me as if I was both crazy and suspicious. "Good. If you haven't, but you will. And I just want to say he's stupid." "Sapman is stupid," Ricardo repeated quietly, as though he couldn't believe those were the real words I had just said. "Yes, but people are going to tell you, and I know because they're talking about it a lot, people are going to tell you the Sapman has something to do with people disappearing." Ricardo looked straight at me, his eyes brightening. He shifted in his seat. I knew right away that he was desperate for any lead, no matter how far-fetched. And I knew that if those kids and news reporters could see what I was seeing, they knew, without a doubt, that he had nothing to do with Holly's disappearance. Ricardo said, not even trying to disguise his hope, "Who is the Sapman?" I knew this conversation was going the opposite direction I'd wanted it to, but I couldn't let this poor kid down. I stammered, "Well, he supposedly lives in the woods. He's the tall man made out of sap from the black maples. He has long, sticky arms, like sometimes lots of arms, or finger thingies, and a bright white head, and no one's ever seen his face." I weighed my words down with a tone of incredulity, trying desperately to convey how stupid the whole idea was, but Ricardo was rapt. He wanted me to go on. "He's not real," I said quickly. "My dad, he works for the town's historic district, and he said the legend of the Sapman probably came from when people first settled Hockstadt. He said they would camp out under black maples, and when the maples lost their leaves, the branches would look like long, spindly arms coming from the tall trunks. And the moon or the sun coming through the trees would be like a big white orb, so people thought it was just a faceless head." "And what does the Sapman do with children?" I sighed. Well, supposedly the Sapman would kidnap them and bring them to this big stone house on a hilly part of the woods so that the town couldn't grow. 'Cause, if your town doesn't have kids, then it dies out. But obviously, our town is doing pretty well, so..." Ricardo stared at me. "It's a small town." "Yeah," I admitted, "but it's nice that way." I didn't know what else to say. Somehow, instead of heading off the dumb legend, I'd given it to him like a gift of hope. I awkwardly unzipped my lunchbox and started to take tiny bites out of my food. Ricardo had stopped eating his carrots altogether. He was staring off into space with narrowed eyes and a bend in his brow. "Are you thinking about the Sat Man?" I asked through a bite of applesauce. I remember he looked at me, or through me, and I remember knowing exactly what he was going to ask as the words left his mouth. "Where is this house?" I didn't ask what he told his parents he was doing after school because I figured it was a lie. And I did not want to be more complicit than I already was. After the last bell rang, I hurried past the gym to the double doors to the back of the school. I looked around, but I didn't see Ricardo. One of the gym teachers, who I never had a class with and didn't know the name of, was setting up orange cones on the field. His eyes were hidden beneath a baseball cap, so I wasn't sure if he knew I was skulking on the edge of his field. Ricardo soon arrived, no backpack, no coat, even though the late March wind sliced goosebumps into my arms. "The house is through there, if you follow the path long enough," I said, pointing to the woods behind the school. "Cool." Ricardo started off towards the path without me, and I had to jog just to keep up, my backpack swishing across my shoulders. I glanced behind me to see if the gym teacher was going to try to stop us, but he didn't. He was watching us, though, so I dashed ahead before he could reprimand us for going into the woods without an adult. Even though I had been to the stone house several times with my dad, I felt nervous. It didn't seem too hard to make a wrong turn and get lost, and I definitely didn't believe in the Sat Man, but I still glanced at every bobbing branch on either side of us with suspicious eyes, almost daring them to be something else. Thankfully, the path never seemed unfamiliar, and we caught our first glimpse of the stone house after about 10 minutes of walking. Ricardo squinted. "Up on that ledge?" "There was some wooden steps to the top," I told him. "For tours and stuff, it housed the first Hochstadt mayor. That's why it was built well enough to survive." Ricardo's eyes scanned the roofless building, the crumbled rocks, and the overgrown yard. He mumbled, "Sort of survive." We stared at one another for minutes in silence, taking in the brief period of rest. From where we stood, the limestone blocks looked like they were being held up by a net of dark tree branches hovering above the winter brush. And then they moved. I swear, they moved. Like one of those magic eye tricks, or a leaf bug from the tree that starts to crawl. I went from not seeing him at all to seeing him all at once. His body was humanoid, but about 4 times the height of a normal man. His face was blank and pearly white as a tooth, but round and long as an egg. His white neck dipped into its collar. It looked like a suit and tie, but it may have been markings, the same way a black widow wears a red hourglass. And his arms. His long arms, they looked like heavy, like tentacles. But they moved like gooey black sap. We screamed. Ricardo wasn't going to move. I don't know if he was in shock or if he wanted to get his sister back from this creature, but he was staying put, so I grabbed his arm and yanked him back down the path. I was undoubtedly slowed by my heavy backpack and by the near-dead weight of Ricardo. But I didn't have time to regroup. I just ran. And when the woods opened back up into the field, I kept running to the double doors of the gym. They were locked from the outside because, it's a school. I didn't look behind me. I pounded on the door over and over, crying and screaming. I felt like the Sat Man was still behind me. I could feel him, his fingers on my shoulder. But it wasn't the Sat Man. It was the gym teacher, coming from around the corner with another armful of orange cones. He led us inside and then asked us to sit in his office and tell him what happened. He was unlocking his office door when Ricardo shook his head so hard that the tears on his face splashed away. "I need to see my parents." He turned and ran down the hall. I glanced apologetically at the gym teacher, then darted after Ricardo. I found him in the school's entryway on his cell phone, repeating over and over, "Just pick me up, just pick me up." His right arm was covered in a shiny black coat of something so slick and smooth that it looked like oil. The Sapman had grabbed his arm while we were running. I felt a sense of unease, like when you see a spider descending from the ceiling and then lose sight of it. I walked to a window and turned around. I craned my neck to look at my reflection. Thick black streaks ran down the length of my backpack. I was really shaken up, so I told my parents about our excursion into the woods. They scolded me for wandering off when another kid had just disappeared, and when I got to the part about the Sapman, though, I underplayed it. Saying things like "it looked like" and "I could have sworn," I had attributed those marks on my backpack to the sap from the branches, and I was doubting everything else that I had seen regarding the Sapman. My parents certainly didn't try to convince me I'd actually witnessed an urban legend. We were all more than happy to write it off as just nightmares or a stress-induced hallucination. Puberty will do that to you, we laughed. I didn't sleep much. A few days later, Ricardo pulled me aside. He told me he had tried to get the police to search the stone house for his sister, but they wouldn't. They said that they already did. They asked him why and what did he know, and he became even more of a suspect. "We have to go back," he said. But I wouldn't. There was going to be a vigil for Holly at Hochstadt Middle School. Candles were ordered, extra parking was roped off in the field, yearbook pictures were sent to Staples and glued to poster board. Everyone was ready to say goodbye. But then, someone saw her. According to the Hochstadt Middle Grapevine, some sixth graders were kicking a soccer ball down first period gym, and they saw Holly standing at the edge of the woods, covered in black paint. And according to the grapevine, the second Ricardo heard about Holly, he hurtled down a flight of stairs so fast that he fell and broke his arm. I believed all of it, except for the paint part. Not paint, sap. She had tried to escape, but that means the Sapman had kept her alive. Even as my brain slowly accepted the Sapman as reality, these elements just didn't want to add up. No one was able to make it over to Holly before she vanished again. Ricardo wasn't at school for the rest of the day, but he showed up on the news in a neon green cast that stuck out against his all-black clothing. He and his parents were there to encourage the new team of searchers preparing to do a second scan of the woods behind the school. Reporters interviewed the kids who saw Holly, and I got an ugly feeling that no one really believed them. They just liked this exciting new update to the tragedy. The searchers turned up nothing. They searched the stone house, but it was empty as usual. They searched the woods miles deep, but nothing seemed strange. They brought out flashlights to comb nooks and crannies as it got dark, but nothing, and nothing. By midnight, no one believed the sixth graders. How could a little girl stay alive for a week out on her own in the woods? Then show up at the school, and then just disappear before anyone could catch her. I saw the adults shake their head, fed up with the charade of believing Holly was alive. No one had really seen Holly, they decided. Kids just love attention, especially middle schoolers. I lay awake that night to piece things together. The next morning, a body was found. That gym teacher who had the orange cones was found where the field meets the woods. He had drowned, they said, or choked. It was hard to say which it was when the substance that filled his lungs was sap. Gallons of black maple sap had burst the lining of his stomach, coated his lungs, and sloshed against his brain. It came out of his nose, his eyes, his ears. I saw the photos. With so many eyes on the scene, nothing like that stays under wraps. Not when it happens so close to a lunchroom, which spread news faster than a telephone wire. The teacher's wife said he had gone to join the search party. He said that he had really just been out late, so she had gone to bed alone. Everyone was still puzzling over the sap-filled corpse when Holly came home. A day after the gym teacher's body was discovered, she wandered into the school building, covered in sap. She would hardly say anything. People gave her time, but still nothing. She would murmur a few words here and there, but nothing else. Nothing that answered any of the questions we had. Until she asked the police if he was really dead. We thought she meant the Sat Man at first. She didn't. They searched the gym teacher's home. They searched his computer. They stopped grieving his death. I swear, I didn't know, the wife sobbed in an interview. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. She's doing better, Ricardo told Dina and me at lunch. It's been a week since Holly's return. She's seeing a child psychologist. We're not sure how bad it got for her, but we think it could have been a lot worse. So that's why she ran away, Dina said. To hide from that creep. Mm-hmm, Ricardo said, but he glanced up at me and I knew we were on the same page. After school, Ricardo and I met behind the gym. We silently walked towards the woods. The weather had gotten much warmer, so I busied myself in the silence by tying my hoodie around my waist. I heard those other kids were on a flash drive, Ricardo said. I pushed a branch out of my way. Troy and Mackenzie? I think so, Ricardo shrugged. And a bunch of others. He didn't answer the question I didn't dare ask. But not Holly. No? I asked happily. She wasn't? He shook his head. If she were, I don't think she'd be alive. He looked directly at me. They're saying he got them. He took those kids and he took their pictures and then he killed them. I played with my sleeve of my hoodie, but not Holly. We stopped and stared at the stone house. I'm moving, Ricardo said. I heard. We walked up to the wooden stairs of the stone house, and around the base of the stone, the ground felt damp and spongy. It sagged with each step. The feeling was weirdly relaxing, like meditative breathing outside my body. Bet your new town won't have cool historic buildings in the woods, I said, trying to ease the tension. I hope not, Ricardo said. I hope it's boring as hell. I laughed. We climbed through one of the stone house's windows. The house was just one large room, and the roof had long since fallen away, but there were remains of a chimney in one corner. A few burnt sticks sat inside like someone had recently built a fire. I looked up at the web of dark branches around us. The Sat Man did not appear, but I squinted. I could imagine the wind-tossed branches were his long arms. Even though I knew the Sat Man had only been trying to protect the kids, including us, I couldn't shake the feeling I got whenever I remembered seeing those black streaks on my backpack. I didn't blame Troy or Mackenzie for running away from the terrifying Sat Man and inevitably towards a teacher who should have kept them safe. I would have too. I didn't know how Holly knew the truth, but I was glad she did. Of course, the Sat Man didn't give her a choice. She was just slower than the rest of us. And I didn't like that Holly had been used as bait. At least that's what I assume she was the time the 6th graders saw her. But I also didn't trust the gym teacher would have been brought to justice if she weren't. Ricardo picked up a piece of charred wood from the fireplace. He tapped it on the stone and left a black streak. He ran it across the stone until he had written the words, "Thank you." I smiled at the words, and Ricardo smiled too. But I wonder if they would go unread. There was a relaxed feeling to the woods I'd never really felt before. Maybe it was just the birds chirping on a first warm spring day, or the green buds appearing on the trees, but maybe the Sat Man had moved on. Maybe he had left to consume another predator. To be some other town's legend by some other name. Ricardo flung the charred stick into the woods, and we leaped down the wooden stairs and followed the path out. We raced each other back to the school, branches crunching underfoot, the smell of black maple sap on the wind. All right, well, I want to thank you guys for watching. It's good to be back. I know I took a massive, I think it's like a 55-day hiatus there. I just kind of got busy with the other channel and doing all that stuff, but I should be posting more of these. Let me know what you guys thought of the story. If you enjoyed it, leaving a like would be great, and subbing is a good way to stay up to date on when I post all of these things, though I imagine probably by September this channel will be a little more popular than it is in, February. Anyhow, like I said, I appreciate you guys watching. Keep an eye out for more in the future, and I will see y'all in the next one.